Welcome to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said, a podcast for insightfully unhinged
and surprisingly therapeutic conversations with all members of the horror community,
including indie and mainstream authors,
influencers,
fellow podcasters,
librarians,
professors,
and therapists.
What kinds of things do we talk about?
Horror as an allegory of society, from brandishing someone who loves horror as a disturbed human being,
to real-life human horrors like systemic racism on Cape Cod and mass incarceration,
the impact of horror on a family, from the happy family traditions,
and also the traumatic experiences,
the ever-present shadow of organized religious trauma,
the ways horror is a formative influence on our lives at different stages,
horror as a catalyst for acceptance and community,
as well as an ever-present source of comfort.
In between all of that are lots of asides, digressions, and stuff you didn't know we'd cover, but you are glad that we did.
You'll feel like you just sat yapping with close friends about your favorite topics. Well, here we are. We've made it to our first episode, and we have quite the banger for you today. We will be talking to author Emma E. Murray, author of the fantastic Crushing Snails and the soon-to-be-released Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day. We're going to talk about abnormal psychology. We're going to talk about having the DSM as your regular nighttime reading as an 11-year-old. We're going to talk about the female experience and how scary it is to be a woman in this country. And we're going to talk about a whole lot of other shit. So hopefully you enjoy this as much as we did having this conversation. If you enjoy the episode, make sure that you subscribe, rate, and review our pod. But even more importantly, buy Crushing Snails and Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day. On to the episode. As soon as we started talking about having this podcast, this is one person I could not wait to talk to. So without further ado, welcome Emma E. Murray to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, welcome. We have been so excited to have you on.
I've been really excited to come on. I'm excited about this new podcast.
Yes. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And I know that we're going to get into some fun stuff, some deep stuff. I think that your work is just really vital, especially in the times that we find ourselves living right now. I think you're really hitting some of the themes and things that really need to be exposed. So I'm really excited to have you on today. So I want to start by saying it's almost like your books are what people think of as horror. And because I think we've talked about this before with horror films, that when people think of genre fans, they're like, oh, people that kind of lust after the kills. They're loving like the violence, all this kind of stuff. And your books are sort of like the opposite of that to me. Like when I read your books, I am dreading any kind of violence. I'm dreading the kills. I like you know when they're coming. Like either book is really not about who is doing this, all this kind of stuff. Your books really are about the why and how society as a whole allows these things to happen.
Allows horrific things to happen.
Yeah.
I would agree that that's what I try and do.
Which is so nice, by the way, because there's oftentimes since we started this that we've gotten more people that typically say they don't read horror. Like I was thinking that I didn't, which turns out that I was. They're like, well, what would you recommend? Like, what's a horror book that isn't going to, be about blank, blank, blank? So I just feel like you're a great person to recommend, especially to, like a larger female audience that seems to be like what you look when you look at like analytics or people that do a little bit more reading. I just feel like you're a great segue to say, start with you.
Wow. I don't know if I would. I feel like I'm a bit
really,
intense,
because, I mean, I would say it too. A lot of my friends they're deep readers, right? We like reading fucked up things. We want to read the horrific stuff. Like we want to have our hearts ripped apart. So,
But
I mean,
think,
it's not just like to the light average reader, but I
Right.
mean, like you would fit the bill for what I think. I'm thinking of my friend Jen right now. She's like, can I have some horror recs? I can't have this. I can't have that.
Well, it's someone that, let's say their general reading goes into the sort of literary fiction realm of whether it's Southern Gothic, whether
Yep.
it's like race relations, whether it's,
Yeah, she
women's literature or any of this kind of thing. I think that your books really kind of dive into that. And I think the first kind of questions that I wanted to go into first was this something, so like, I don't want to say like in general serial killers or true crime, but like the dark sort of psychological mindsets that people that are in those sort of realms, is that something that's always interested you? Was there a particular book, movie, true case that really got you into thinking about these psyches and mindsets? Like, how did this all begin?
So it definitely began with the psychology of everything because I've been obsessed with abnormal psychology like my whole life. My dad was a psychologist and we had the DSM lying around. So I actually
no
started reading
way.
that. Like, yeah, when I was like probably like 11.
Little light reading.
I know, right? And my whole family is really, my mom had a degree in psychology. My sister is a therapist now, and I ended up getting a degree in psychology as well. And I've just always been very, very interested in abnormal psychology and basically when things go wrong, and also developmental psychology and how it goes along with that and how do things go wrong when you're young. And
Yeah.
so that definitely, along with, I did fall into that whole true crime wave. I still really enjoy true crime.
Oh,
Like,
I'm right there with you. Like, totally. We were just watching on Netflix the 3-part documentary about the woman that disappeared on the cruise ship. Did you hear
yes,
about?
oh, that's on my list. Don't tell me too much. I haven't watched it yet.
It's
I
really
will tell
good.
you, I don't know if you ever have been. We never have been, and we never will go on a cruise.
I already was claustrophobic and afraid of the neurovirus, but this sealed the deal for me, baby. I don't need to ever go.
No, I will
Man,
never
yeah, I
be
haven't been
cruising.
on a cruise yet.
No, well, watch this soon, so you
This
never
is
do.
to
Stay
do with
safe.
this is nothing to do with the plot of the show here, but what we learned is
Yeah,
that when you're on a cruise ship, it's like you're basically with a small city of people.
it's totally lawless because you're in international
Yeah, when you're
waters.
in international waters, like there is no law. And like basically the law is the captain and who's ever the security guards there. And
They're obviously being paid by the cruise ship, so their first and foremost thing is to keep the cruise line safe.
Yeah.
And any bad press or anything that could help hurt that billion-dollar industry, it's more about suppressing that than it is finding what may have happened to people.
yeah, and I just had no idea it was this like lawless sort of thing. So anyway, yeah, I'll pass.
Yes,
But do
but
check it out.
yes, no, I think yeah, and please tell me what you think about it after you watch it. Tell us what you
I
think.
I will.
So, true crime, yes.
So yes, like, so I mean that of course that goes along with my interest in psychology even before I was really into like listening to the podcasts and watching all the documentaries. I was reading a lot of nonfiction books, like even in high school about, psychopathy and serial killers. And I just have always been really, really intrigued by how do they become who they are, which is something that I explore in lots and lots of my fiction, short and long. So, I mean, it's just always been something I'm absolutely obsessed with. And I mean, my one of my very favorite movies is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Oh my God.
And that's the
It's,
vibe I'm often
yeah,
going for.
I think so because I think it's a thing where you understand but don't sympathize, and that's a really hard line to draw in a book or a story about someone like this that, you risk sort of sympathizing with the behavior and the person. But Henry's a perfect example of like, you might have some sort of feelings towards Henry and, this sort of like really fucked up found family, but like
Mhm.
you don't, he's not a hero, and I think
No,
that
and
that's
the
where like
end,
yeah, oh
my
yeah,
God, it killed
yeah.
me, dude.
Yes. But like I think that that's where maybe a lot of the criticism in true crime and different things, especially like these, the Ted Bundy things and the Jeffrey Dahmer, where it was like almost glamorizing and,
Hmm.
making, so many people were like, oh man, I'm hot for Ted Bundy and stuff like that, where it's like,
Yeah, gross.
you're not going to walk away from your work or Henry feeling that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like with Crushing Snails, I tried really hard to have the reader feel a strange like combination of like empathy and disgust with themselves for empathizing
Uh-huh.
with Winnie. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, with Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day, I tried really hard to actually focus a lot more on victims and humanize them, because that is one of my criticisms of true crime, is that while I do enjoy consuming true crime media, I think some of them I can't stand, because the victims really become almost like props, because
Yes.
it's just so much about like, yeah, like glamorizing in a way the killer, instead of trying to understand them and trying to understand how did this whole dynamic happen, and maybe how to not find yourself in that situation and those kind of things, or even solving the crime. Some of them are very much about, open cases. But I don't like it when it feels like sometimes they're not even really barely named, especially in some of
Yeah.
the ones that are more comedy based. And that was just, ugh,
That's
that
what I
rubs
was
me
gonna
the
say
wrong
is
way.
like some of them approach it as like a stand-up comedy where they're talking about real people being murdered, and like that is just leaves like such a gross feeling, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not how you should think about these things. And I think that is a fair criticism of true crime, that we're seeing a lot of kind of backlash against true crime because there are so many things like that, because I do think that you can't separate yourself so much from it and think of it as just fiction, because that is true crime.
Yeah.
Like those people really got injured or killed. And so it's
Yeah.
like,
And I
so
think
I
that in
definitely
your
try
book,
not
yeah,
to make it too fun. Yeah.
yeah, well, and I don't want to make it seem like it's like drudgery at the same time too, because I think that the way that you do these stories, and it's funny because Crushing Snails and Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day are such flip sides, of this
Mhm.
coin. Where like in Crushing Snails, it is so important to identify and understand Winnie, and to ask that question is, if these things that in her formative years did not happen, who would Winnie be,
Mhm.
instead of what we read happens in this book, right? So, like, when you say you're interested in the developmental psychology, I think that, if you want to get into a little bit more of that with Winnie and what she's been through, I think that that's so fascinating, and like almost like Shakespearean tragedy in a way, that as you're watching it, you're like, she is so kind and has so much empathy towards things, and she could have been something so different, but because of the evil of the people around her, like, or the apathy of the people around her, she goes down this other path.
Yeah, I mean, I really, with Crushing Snails, wanted to explore that nature versus nurture, which is such a big part of psychology, and
Yes.
how do people become who they are. And I mean,
Yes.
she also does have some parts of her that are just hereditary, that are going to be difficult challenges. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's always a combination, and that's what most people come to the conclusion. And so I really tried to show, how do all these factors come together. And I really I've had a couple people reach out and say that they like how there's characters in the book that if they had just acted differently, or, gotten help
Said
or said
something. Yeah.
something, it could have been totally different. And of course, that's like the readers, they're living it, in the fictional world. But so it's one of those, we're seeing it from the outside. But I really wanted to show that, yeah, sometimes a little thing could have made a difference. And so that's something I did do on purpose. So I'm
That's
glad people
so
see that. Yeah.
That's so like, I don't know the word for it. It's not like choose your own adventure or whatever, but it's like, you never know how something so small is going to change the course or impact certain things. Yeah. I love, in fact, yesterday, Adam and I were talking about the nature versus nurture, and just how it's amazing. We were talking, about like family trauma with his family, and how he and his sister are 5 years apart, and they hadn't really discussed something that had happened, and they were discussing it yesterday, and it was like, wow, lo and behold, they both have like nearly identical behaviors for this without like having ever known it. And it just was like, well, that just really explains the whole point of, growing up in an environment and what it shapes and what it does. And, I feel like there's this opportunity to have curiosity to then, once you realize like, oh, this actually might not be my personality, how do
Yeah.
you lean into it to like, what do I actually prefer? So there's a lot to just kind of go down that what what genes are turned on, or what behaviors or attitudes are turned on that might actually be a traumatic response versus, is that what you would have actually selected? I just find it all very fascinating, how they would do like twin studies or whatever, and with the fact that you two are not twins or anything, but see like I mean, it was like word for word. It was like, it was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where like our parents did certain things and we were estranged for many years and really didn't speak at all, and very recently started talking, and it was like, oh, I do this and she does the exact same thing.
And her partner notices the same thing. And I was like, this is wild. Like, yeah, very cool.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Like, I mean, it really shows how much your environment affects who you become.
Yeah, I'm a sociology major, so I've always been fascinated by ascribed status and achieved status. So basically, where you're born, who you're born to, what social status and environment and lifestyle is ascribed for our listeners that might not know those exact words. And like achieved is really how far can you climb and what can you do with what you've been given and where you go within society and whatnot. And it just it's kind of like, what cards are you given? We're not all set up equal. And the environments within those aspects of ascribed and achieved play so much.
Yeah, I do. I find that fascinating too, honestly, and honestly really sad because, yeah, there's only so much you can do. Some people break through that, but it's difficult because you are dealt certain cards that you can't help about your childhood and your status and all of that.
Yeah. And I guess often, Adam, you know this, I've often thought about this, like, what person would I be if I was born in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah.
What person would I be if I was born at this time versus that time?
Mm-hmm.
Like, would I be a different, it's just all those things that it impacts. I love that you put that in your books of just this one choice or this one moment, it shifts.
Yeah.
Because I
I've
think like,
also,
and I want to go to Shoot Me in the Face too, but in Crushing Snails, I think that is seen so many times in Winnie's like journey of, if she was shown compassion instead of either apathy or anger, it could have changed this and that thing. And like you said, so her, it's early on, hopefully it's not a spoiler. Her mother has severe mental health, and it reads as paranoid schizophrenic, that her mother is hearing things, she's breaking through walls and all that stuff. So, obviously there is that genetic factor that Winnie may have inherited, when it comes to some of the struggles that she might have later on. But it's really, especially how her father responds to the mother's, psychosis and everything, that kind of changes how Winnie interacts with the entire world. And, that's such a fascinating thing to read. And then also, I'm also the middle child, and I did not in any way, shape, or form have any of the same experiences that Winnie does. But there is that sort of like, okay, this is the child that is going to have to do everything. This is the one that's going to be dependent on, and it's going to be treated much differently than the other two. And the way that you explore that and the repercussions of that is also something that's really interesting. And I just wondered if that was from studies that you've seen, where that sort of dynamic of the siblings and how differently they're treated comes from.
So I'm so glad that she comes across like a middle child because I'm actually an oldest. So,
Brendan, no, I'm kidding.
and so I get it though. Being a middle child is hard. Like my middle sister, like she's definitely has talked about how it's hard. That is definitely part of the dynamic. I am fascinated by like family dynamics. And I think that did play in. But I also feel like there's just a lot of times it's not the oldest that becomes the scapegoat in families. And so I thought it made sense that she wouldn't be the oldest, you know?
Well, I can verify that because I have been the scapegoat for going on 20 years for my family for everyone else's behaviors.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, let's just fill out the full color here.
Okay.
You know how like, okay, things can happen in a family and there's like this mental acknowledgement, especially from like when you're a kid to when you're an adult, that you recognize like your parents are not superheroes. They're just people doing their best, doing what they can. There's a lot of compassion for that. However, when you have the opportunity to go to therapy and you don't do those things, as ubiquitous as it is to get help now. And the thing is your mother had some of the worst possible things. I mean, she lived in her own horror novel, right?
Her childhood was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, from, sexual violence, physical violence, extreme poverty, like a level of like the family would like see roadkill on the ground and be like, that's dinner for tonight, for all the kids sort of thing. So I get all that, but that led to alcoholism. And that led to never, I don't know. It's like that. I don't have my handy dandy DSM laying here, Emma. I'm sorry. But it's like basically what I like to refer to as dry drunk, in terms of all the alcoholic behaviors that are terrible, but without the presence of alcohol. And that has leached into a family. And there's a lot of words within the space of like triangulation where people are pitted against, a lot of enablement of let's just keep this one person happy. And that makes,
don't tell anybody about what's going on. It stays in this family.
Right.
Like no one, you don't share. And I am also from Tennessee originally. And while we grew up mostly in Washington, D.C., I think some of these behaviors and thoughts are very indicative of the Southern sort of mentality and experience of like, we keep it all, to ourselves. We don't share anything. And also like,
you're supposed to uplift your mother. It's like, you're not supposed to really bring shame. And there's a lot of expectations around caring and all that stuff. But the fact is that has a tremendous impact on the entire family. And while I completely understand how she got there and I have complete compassion for that, I also, have no tolerance for continuing to harm and create, further problems. And so, for a long time, it was very difficult to be the black sheep and to lose a whole family. There is grief and death and all that with it. However, now there's safety. Now there's freedom. Now there's help. But I know like for you, you've used several horror books, starting with Black Sheep and other things to really process your emotions. It's been really freeing.
Yeah, I should probably, Laurel Hightower should bill me for the door, like the traumas that I worked through in some of those books. But definitely it's like, and that's sort of like, again, some of the conversations that we would have together that started this podcast of, horror is catharsis. I think that horror, like these books that you're writing, like help us to understand the things that we see and hear about. And, I think also, you kind of said this about the true crime, like looking at people and keeping yourself safe, especially Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day, because as you go through victims, a lot of them recognize sort of that they're in a dangerous position or that maybe they should do this. But it's again, that sort of like politeness or it wouldn't be me or it can't be me or like that kind of things that kind of end up getting them killed essentially. And so like something like these books are reading things like this, both for someone like me and in a sort of mental, emotional situation, but then also your physical safety, like these books can be vital for both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the victims, I really actually was really trying to show people that it's not just, oh, it wouldn't be me. It's more that society gaslights women into thinking that they are overreacting whenever they are trusting their gut or whenever, like, I mean, I've heard men make fun of women for carrying keys in their, between their fingers in a creepy area. Yeah. And it's like, no, these things really do happen. There's a reason why women are afraid. And I really wanted to get into that because these women, I hope it doesn't come across as victim blaming because they do consider like, oh, maybe I should do something and they don't. But the thing is, they're basically told that they're being paranoid, and that,
and
that's not
also
going
like,
to happen to
no,
them.
I don't think it comes off as victim blaming at all, but it also shows like these systems, whether it's like the way that an apartment building is set up or a hotel or a house or any of that kind of stuff. It's like, it's not set up to protect you. You know what I mean? And like if someone wants to do harm, it's hard to, even if you're the smartest person, if you have all these different things, it can still happen. I think that almost, I can't remember all of them, but these victims in this book, they are smart and they are capable and it happens anyway because of some of the things that you're talking about. Like they do everything, almost everything right in certain instances, and it still happens. And I think that is where like that's scary. And I think that like kind of makes you think something needs to change in order for that to not be so easy and for someone to be able to continue doing it over and over and over again like the character in this book does.
Well, it's interesting that, Emma, that you said victim blaming because that was what I was going to say. First, they're blamed or they're not believed. And then afterwards, after something happens, well, why didn't she leave? Why did she put up with this? Why did she stay in that environment? It's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
That is so true. And that was a big part of the domestic violence in Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day is that, so I myself am a survivor of domestic violence and I am donating a portion of my royalties, and I did already from my advance of Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day to the National Domestic Violence Hotline because I was able to escape a situation like that. But I really wanted to write about domestic violence because I feel like it's so black and white. People are either like very blamey and like, well, why didn't she just leave? Like there was lots of red flags, like, or like sometimes you see the depiction of like this perfect angel who's being held by this like absolute demon and like she's flawless. And then usually in that narrative, she's able to escape. And it's just very, I don't know, very like easy in a lot of ways. And so I wanted to show that like, abusers are really good at finding people who are really, they're insecure, they have a lot of trauma and things they're dealing with. And then they prey on that and they dig into that. And it's not so easy. It's not like, these people who are going through this, you find yourself trapped in this. And then on top of that, there's this cognitive dissonance where you're like, well, he can't be that bad. I've been here this long and sometimes he's good and I probably deserve this. And I really wanted to dig into all of that because I feel like it's so much more complicated than people who haven't been in those situations sometimes think it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that comes off so interestingly in this book. And I think that,
It's very
well,
everything you say of like I could just pause and be like, okay, let's pick this apart. And that's like I have so many things that I'd like to say, and I love that you're bringing all these psychology terms. So good.
yeah. And Russ is so interesting in that because he is like, the narcissist. It's like, oh no, I'm the one that's being hurt by you. I'm not hurting you. You're hurting me. And then the love bombing and all of these things. And it's like, it is so complicated. And for someone that's already been through horrific tragedy like Birdie has, it's so easy to judge until you're in like these situations, especially someone that's like, no one's ever going to love me again.
Yeah.
And how this person loves me. Like, how can you make that choice to leave when you've felt that way? And really the people around her have kind of made her feel that way too. So once you're in a situation where you feel like someone accepts you, even with all of this around it, it is not an easy thing to say, I'm going to leave that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Birdie did make mistakes and is a flawed person, but because she met Russ at a time where she was already so down, he was able to chop her down even further. And that
Yeah.
is the hardest time to leave, is whenever you're completely under that whole impression that this person is the only person who could ever care about you. And so you're just desperate for scraps of affection. And I really wanted to get that dynamic of abusive relationships in there so that people can see it's not so easy,
Yeah. I mean, you could see just even for like, and this isn't giving away too much, but even just like at the very beginning of the book where she forgets to take some chicken out of the freezer. And he's just like, oh, you did this to me. And like, why couldn't you just remember? And she's like, okay, I'm so sorry. Just like, okay, I'm sorry. I'll have to eat sloppy Joe again. And it's just like, it feels like that concept of like the frog that doesn't realize it's boiling because the water only goes up, gets hotter 1 degree at a time, sort of thing.
That's
And it
a
just like,
great analogy. Yeah.
yeah, he just doesn't realize how terrible it is. And, it's like, that's part of the abuse, right? Is like, also like, it's my fault. I did these things and you just internalize it. And, her friend is like, immediately a good friend is like, this is kind of bullshit. And, but it's not just so easy, right? You're in an apartment, you live with someone, like there's a lot of other aspects. It takes a lot. So
Yeah.
I just, without giving too much away, I think that this is a book that, if you're a true crime listener, because you're like, I can't believe this shit happened. I never want to be the person like that walks in and they were the light of the room or life of the party, right? Because you're going to get murdered. But this is just another way to just, I think, become more savvy to pick up these little clues and say like, do I see a friend that's in this position? Am I making situations like this? Like there's so much to learn from your books. And we always talk about like the empathy that you can learn, but hopefully people will start to be less victim blaming from these too. But just as a female, or as you're looking at the, Adam with having two girls, it's like watching these things of, oh, red flag. Like, there's a lot to take away from this, Emma.
Thank you. I mean, that means a lot to me. And you know what? Actually, my own book helped me a little bit because I have definitely, I mean, I've had creepy people follow me around and stuff, but it was not that
Yeah.
long ago that I got followed around at the grocery store by a man, and he didn't even have a shopping cart or anything. And he was staring at me, and then he was
God.
like pretending to look at groceries. Like he was obviously pretending because he never picked anything up. And
God.
I was like thinking, oh my God, I literally wrote about a woman who gets
Yeah.
followed around at the grocery store. And I was like, but even in those moments, I mean, I definitely was like more prepared to deal with it because I've thought about this so much. Thank you, true crime, you know?
Yeah.
But even then, it was hard. I didn't do everything right. I mean, I honestly, like at one point, I was going to tell the cashier, but then he seemingly left. And so instead of saying anything, I was like, okay, well, it's over. And then he actually was in the parking lot, parked right next to me. And I was so scared. Thankfully, it was the middle of the day and there was other people out. They weren't like right next to us, which was kind of scary. But man, I made sure I actually drove a crazy way home because I wanted to make sure he wasn't following me, and I was like, wow, it's so hard because even then it was hard to trust my gut, even when I was like, this guy is being creepy. But I was able to, I mean, I'm a kind of an anxious, like meek person. And so even then, though, I was able to have like the strength that at one point when he was staring at me, I just stared right back at him, like, what the fuck? Because
Yeah.
I was like, I'm finally going to do something. This man has been following me around, And yeah, it's so hard though. It's so hard to judge women for anything they do in these situations. I mean, anyone, but especially women, because these kind of things do tend to happen to women because it's so scary and you don't act 100% like how you think you would when have a lot of adrenaline and something creepy is happening.
Yeah. I think that, and the fact is that, the thing that's makes me angry on the outside looking in, is that all of the responsibility is on you in that situation. Like,
Yeah.
True.
why are employees at this grocery store who are walking around not noticing this? Why are they not trained on these situations and like finding that out and saying like, okay, if there's someone in our store that's wandering around with no cart and fake picking things up, that we talk to that person, that
Yeah.
we approach them. It should not be on the person because the fact is like, it is almost impossible that that is the first time this person did this and that it's the last time that that person
Oh, yeah.
do this. And, the fact is that they're only going to do it if no one is clocking it and
Yeah.
no one is saying like, I remember you now.
Yes.
Like, I see you.
What are
I
you
see
doing?
what
Yeah.
you're doing. Don't come back here and do this.
Well,
again.
two things. One, our oldest daughter is almost 23. And I mean, early on, I mean, she has carried mace, like the bright pink one on a thing. Like she's like barely 5 foot and like 100, like 10 pounds, mate, like 100, like she's tiny. I mean, she's feisty as
Yeah.
hell, but tiny. And, it's like, it's a reality. Like as soon as she started driving and being off by herself and, we went through all the, like, look for this, look for that, be aware. And she does a really good job of that. But it's like, it is a concern. Like as a pretty girl, you attract, creeps through no fault of your own, just being at the grocery store or whatever it is. And, I don't remember my second point.
But no,
Yeah.
and it really is. It's like to teach. And again, it's putting the responsibility on the person that's going to be victimized. But we definitely teach our kids, like, don't be nice. Like, don't be kind to people, especially men, especially, men that you don't know and have no business talking to you. You owe them nothing. Like, tell them to fuck off the second they approach you. He could be giving you $1 million. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, you're really good about that as a
Go
dad.
away. Like, you know what I mean?
But that's because you give an inch, like you give anything. And if you'll tell the story about that time that you and I were at the movie theater together.
Oh yeah. So, and that's the other thing is I feel like, men feel like being like, as long as you're not doing it, you're an ally enough. And I'm like, that is bullshit. That's not the case. Like, so I think it was Black Friday.
Mhm.
We went to go see a movie and the theater's not busy. And this man sits directly next to Rebecca, like in the movie theater. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
almost
so
empty.
weird.
And I'm like, no, move to the other side. I'm sitting next to this man. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, that is not, it's not acceptable or okay. And, it takes, yeah. And then talking to Rebecca like they're old friends when they've never met, and it's just like, I don't care who you are, what you're doing, what your motives actually are. You do not, like, my proximity in a public space does not give you access to me. And I think that that's what a lot of people feel like. And, even in that grocery store situation, I'm sure in the back of your mind, you're thinking, if I go up to say something, they're just going to be like, what are we supposed to do? He can be here.
Yeah,
What I
or
mean?
not believe me, because like women aren't believed all the time too,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh,
Or it's this whole thing of
you
like,
must
oh, what
listen to
makes you
too
think
much
you're so
true
special?
crime.
This, yeah. Yeah. So that's so frustrating. And
But I'm so thankful for like people like you, like, and honestly, anyone, but especially men who are able to stand up whenever they see a woman that is uncomfortable, because there are many women who have a fawn response. And
yeah,
so even though you might think, okay, I'm going to tell this guy to fuck off, like when you're in that situation, it's not so easy. And sometimes, I mean, I have been in situations where a man was acting really aggressively and I didn't feel safe to tell a guy to just go away.
right.
And
Right.
so you are kind of like, hoping someone notices that this is not okay, and if you see that, it's so amazing whenever somebody comes and helps you and it's like, is this guy bothering you? Or like, hey, she seems like she doesn't want to talk to you. And it's like, oh my God, thank you. And so
Yeah.
that's something that I would love for more people to realize, because I think like a lot of times there are people, and especially men, who would gladly do that to help a woman, but they don't even notice it happening.
Yeah, and that's the
You know?
thing is it's like just being aware of what's going on. And even like outside of that, like when I'm in spaces, I try to be, to recognize like I might just be looking for something or reaching for something, but it can come across aggressively if I'm, close to someone or even
Mhm.
walking out like from a store and stuff like that. Like I try to like I'll wait and for someone to get into their car before I'll walk into the parking lot because it's like I don't want to cause discomfort or like things. And I don't think we realize how as a man, it's sort of like go to the other side. You know what I mean? It's like don't walk right
Yeah.
behind somebody. Like just these little things to make it so that people feel comfortable in their space and in their world. Like it doesn't take a lot.
That's a
So
green
No, I
flag,
got
Adam.
it.
Right, Emma? That's a green flag.
well, I'm just saying like
Yes, it is a green flag.
Like the one thing I was going to say, I did come back to
yeah,
me is even in places and spaces where you should be safe and feel safe. I remember years ago when we started going to this particular church and my mom was like single at that time, like, like later 50s, early 60s, but she was going to a lot of these, like just they try to get people to, have singles and get together and whatnot. And this one guy just kept showing up and he'd show up in a muscle shirt with his like nips always hanging out and just wasn't doing anything like specifically like overt, but like was making everyone really uncomfortable, and just over and over again. And you would just see that like eventually like the church had to be like, hey, like you need to leave. Like, you can't come to this. And it was just like enough like behaviors of creepiness and like trying to call people and talk, just lots of and it just made and I think like everyone got that feeling of like, this is weird, and, I know that's got to be hard, but
and that's in a group situation. But what
that's
happens
what I mean.
when you're, at the store
And you're leaving the church at night after a meeting and
yeah, and he's there and he's like, hey, can I have your phone number? And like you said with the fawn response, it's like you don't feel like you can't.
wait,
And then you end up giving them your phone number. You know what I mean?
oh
Like,
my God. Wait, I have like the best story right now.
God,
You know where this is going.
in DC?
No.
No, a different one. Okay.
So speaking of church again, Emma,
Oh,
Emma,
God.
it's like it is
Ah,
Christmas morning.
oh my
Okay.
Lord.
My mom always hosts Christmas. My parents have been divorced now for years, whatever. My mom's a huge part of the church. And she's like, text everyone. She's like, good morning. Like, we're going to have a guest with us for Christmas Day. And we're like, you're shitting us, right? Like, we've never, like, we don't have any extended family. Like, we have a big family with like
Locally.
siblings and, kids and whatever. It's going to be like 20 some of us already just from her to like directly. And we're like, she's like, yeah, I ran into, like, it happened to be church was Sunday. Like, yeah, no, it was that morning. It was a Sunday.
Oh, was I? Okay.
And so she said she saw this man, Bill, that was
All alone.
all alone. And she said,
No.
do you have anywhere to go? are you going to be eating dinner alone? Like
He just said, what are you doing today? And he said, I'll be home alone eating bologna
eating
sandwiches.
a bologna sandwich, right? So she says, well, why don't you come? Come to my house and eat. You can sit with my children and I. And at this point, like, we're not giving it open the way that like she is. We're like, this is shit. Like, this is like a sacred time. And it's not that we wouldn't invite other people that are alone, but it's like, this guy is like, we don't know anything about him, right? So we're sitting there and we have a 10-year gap between our children. And I had shared with Mo, it was because of like extreme morning sickness and whatever, but this guy does not know us. And he sits there and looks at me. He's like, so was this one planned or was she an accident?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, all right, that's a pretty big strike.
You guy, get out.
And then he's sitting there talking to me as my mom's cooking. And he's like, yeah, your mom came up to me and said, hey, what are you doing later? And I told her, I'm going to be at home eating a bologna sandwich. And the thing is, I don't even like bologna. And I was like,
No,
you
the
need to
way
get the
he
fuck
says
out.
that.
You
You
need
need
to
to get
leave.
the fuck
Or-
out. And so now it's like this running joke, like every Christmas, like, oh, Bill's going to be here. But I mean, he starts going into this thing about how many letters he's written to his like
ex-wife.
and it's just like, it's unfolding like a true crime. Like, what did you do, Mom?
I'm like, this man knows where you live. Like,
And then
do
he
you
sat there
understand
like
that?
he was going to get presents.
Mhm.
It was weird.
Oh my God. See, I
The
feel
moral is don't go to church.
Yes, exactly.
that is a great moral of the story.
No, but I think
I
it
mean-
is very much shows like there's this type of man that feels like he
Was
deserves
entitled. And she was
entitled,
just trying to be kind. And I know like she had a big heart, but look at that situation that she could have,
Mhm.
imagine if this was just
I
another
mean,
day, not a Christmas day where everyone's over. Like,
And
what
he
kind
just
of
comes
weird
over
shit?
by-
it's great when people are trying to help people because there are a lot of lonely people and stuff. But honestly, I feel like a lot of times those do end up being kind of dangerous situations. Like my
Yes, and
sister,
yes.
she's like 8 years younger than me, so she was still living at home when I was gone, and my dad was driving. And he saw a hitchhiker, and like, okay, he's old,
What?
so he's like, I used to hitchhike. There's nothing wrong with hitchhiking, even though it's like, okay, nobody hitchhikes anymore. And he had my sister in the car. She's like 10 or
No.
12 or something. And he let this guy in. He was like, I'll give you a ride. And they only just start going. And the guy goes, hey, I have a bunch of knives. Do you want to buy a knife? And he's
Are
sitting
you
like right
shitting
next
me?
to my sister. And my dad, he pulled over and was like, get out. But I'm like, oh my God, you're so lucky that he didn't kill you guys or like carjack you or something. Like, why did you pick that? Actually, it's one thing if he wants to do it by himself, but I'm like, my little sister was in the car. Why did you do that?
Okay, I had to look. I'm going to look it up right now, but there is a podcast right now where there is a guy and he's in the 70s and he picks up a hitchhiker or he's hitchhiking and he gets picked up and he gets out and he realizes years later, it comes across the wire that like he's a journalist, that this is a serial killer and he was in the guy's car and he
See,
survived.
like, I'm sorry. It is not the 70s. There is no
Wow,
hitchhiker. Like,
I'm
I
just
would
saying,
never
like,
pick
you
up a
gotta-
hitchhiker. I'm sorry.
But it was like basically, he was like, oh my God, like all the things to get in and out. And he was like covering it. I'll look it up here in a second, but wild.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
it
crazy.
just the amount that you have to sort of be cautious, and it doesn't matter where you live, where you're at,
In your
that's so
home, with your
important. Yeah,
partner,
like in
anything.
places that you think you're safe. But to change the subject just a little bit, because I wanted to ask this question because I was thinking about it. So Rebecca brought up Juliana a little bit and Shoot Me in the Face, and the juxtaposition of her and Brendan, especially, but Brendan, Crystal, and even Jeremy in Crushing Snails, that Juliana's the friend that you hope to have.
Yeah.
And when you started writing this and developing that character, I obviously read these kind of back to back. And so it was, more obvious probably to me as I'm reading it, like the flip of that is, were you going into this character saying, I want to make a character that does the right things? And it doesn't necessarily, like, obviously there's different things to it that happens with Birdie, but even with that friend, it's not perfect.
Yeah, I actually really wanted, so I obviously a big part of domestic violence is one of the things they do is isolate you from your friends and family. But I wanted to show that basically that dynamic that sometimes you do know somebody, like you're saying, that's going through this kind of thing and you might not even realize it, but like obviously Juliana does, but that it's so complicated. Birdie still can't hear it. Like she wants
Yes.
help, but she
Yes.
also doesn't. So I wanted to be
Yep.
able to show that because it does give you an outside view also of like how, like, yeah, no, this isn't okay. Like, no matter what Birdie says, you know? And
Yeah,
I think,
that's so important though. And I was gonna say that like I was that girl.
Not with me.
It was not with you. It was not with you. But my friends started saying like, we hate him. We hate him. And I was
Yeah.
like, why would you say that? You know what I mean? It was like, I couldn't hear them. And then, like actually had a boss that was really good to me. And she was like, you need to leave this person. She's like, you need to be like, get away from him. You need to get under the protection of someone. And I was like, what? And I still didn't hear it. And
yeah.
like, this is a story for another time, not now, but I just was not able to hear them, Emma. I was like, why do they hate him? Like, why can't they see these good things? And like, why would they say such mean things? Like, I had a friend who goes like, he was like, he's like a waste of a breath of air. And I was like, how would you ever say something like that about someone? It was just like they pushed me further into the web, and this, it was so charming and so just, I never knew anything about love bombing at that time.
Mhm.
Just I didn't know any better. And then years later was able to connect with some of their first fiance, and like the trail of women that, and it's like the stories of what has happened from them to me to going down the line. It's like, wow, this is a pattern. But I got out, but not unscathed or unharmed. But, it's like we can't hear our friends, and they must have some, it's like, are we glamored like a vampire? Like we're under like a spell that we can't hear it, can't
Well, I
feel
mean,
it.
that comes from somewhere that they think
Right.
of
That's
that.
a good point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thing. I had a lot of my friends that told me, yeah, they hated him. They didn't think he was good for me. Like straight up, I should leave. And then it was crazy because when I finally did leave, I had other friends that were like, yeah, I always hated that guy. And I was just like, what? You never said anything. I thought you liked him, like, and they're like,
No,
no,
it's weird. I'm
that's why
talking
we
to
saw
one
you
friend
less
right
and less.
now, and
Like,
I was like, I always fucking hated that guy. But you always told her. Well, you were always like,
Yeah. No, I was the one that told her when she was with him. But I think that, it's interesting when you talk about this because, like, I think Juliana approaches her with a lot of sensitivity about it, but
she is.
it activates this shame in
yeah.
Birdie, I think, that makes her pull away when she's hearing the truth.
Yeah, which makes sense because that's the thing is that she is so bought in. Like you're saying, it's more complicated than that, especially when you live with someone, your finances are all tied together and things. And so she kind of wants to hear it. But at the same time, yeah, it becomes so embarrassing and shameful. And she can't help but push Juliana away because she wants her to be there for her, but like it is hard. I also feel for those friends. Like you can only be there for someone so many times. It gets frustrating
Yeah.
whenever they're always asking you to support them emotionally, but then they're not changing.
Pl-
And yeah,
Plus, Russ is there saying she's this terrible person.
yeah,
She's trying to break us apart. And Juliana's like, yeah, I mean, I am,
yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
like,
yeah,
and that kind of reinforces the things that he's saying, especially when things are on good terms. It's just, you capture how difficult these situations are so well.
And you know what comes into my mind is like I think about women in their late teens, early 20s, 30s. Like you're not at that level where you have learned enough life experience for things, and you're at that stage where you're seeking out, I think, a mate and looking for things. And so you're I'm just curious, I think it probably happens more at those younger ages is what I mean, because as you get older, I feel like the older you get as a woman, 50s, 60s, 70s, you're like, I don't want a man. I don't need a man. I'm independent. I don't need this. Like, I don't need to take care of this adult baby.
40s.
No, seriously, like that is like what I'm seeing among these women right now that are like, they all own their own homes. They don't need this. But men at that age now are like, take care of me,
Hmm.
love me. As soon as their spouse dies, they want to have another woman to take care of them.
Hmm.
Whereas when you're in that, younger age, you're kind of pursuing men. You want that. And
yeah.
I just think that you don't have enough backbone, enough experience to just like be able to walk away. You've invested so much. I just feel like you're probably much more likely and susceptible at that age, right? Like, I don't know. I don't have statistics for this, but I would be curious to see, like, it's just, um, I would imagine with hormones and everything like that. It's just a right time to be really taken advantage of for a lot of
Yeah,
different reasons.
I think that, yeah, you believe kind of in the fairy tale, like whenever you're younger, every relationship. I mean, for me, I like always fell in love really easy. And so it's like
Yeah.
everyone was the one, and
Yes.
you see everything with, yeah, rose tinted glasses. I think that the older women who end up in these situations are ones who are going through some very terrible trauma or very broken in some way, because I also think if you've been raised, for instance, in an abusive situation, those are also people who tend to seek out, not meaning to, but like they do
They
seek
send out
out
some kind of
abusers.
signal.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
like, and
people that
so
are like that are like, ooh, I see a victim.
And
yeah,
that's,
and so
well,
unfortunately those people
because
come together a lot. Yeah, because it's almost like a weird doomed thing. Because I do think that, yeah, like, even I think it's more likely to happen if you're young because you are naive and not as experienced and stuff. But if you were raised in a really healthy family, I think it's less likely to happen to you. You have a lot more, you understand what a relationship should look like. You have a lot more of like a, safety net. Your family and friends are, there for you more, like, versus people who come from like a home more like Winnie's. I think that's someone who's going to fall into that way easier because someone is love bombing you, and
Yep.
someone, and like you also are, you're used to putting up with that kind of thing to an extent. And then it might happen, creeps in slowly, as a lot of abuse does. And then suddenly you realize, oh no, this is the situation I'm in.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point too, where you're like, if you've shown really like stuff is normal or has become normalized when you enter into this other relationship, why would you not think that still and accept it essentially?
well, I mean, that definitely happened with us. Like after dealing with the situation that I had dealt with and meeting you, and I remember saying to my close friend at that time, I was like, he is too even keel. Like I'm bored, and she was like, girl, he's a musician. He's got trauma. He's got shit. And I was like, okay.
I'm also not a musician, so I'm not sure where
Babe, you were
that
playing the guitar is like, look, if you're happy that you're here, okay,
Okay, I
like,
got yes, thank you.
but I mean, she was just like, girl, he's just like being behaved right now. He's got some shit.
I mean, I did,
And
but
I know. And then, but like, isn't that like sick that someone needed to talk me into the fact that you were,
wasn't the high, you're so used to the highs and the lows and
yeah,
those
that you
things that
had enough, that
mhm.
I needed the chaos. And she's like, don't worry, it'll be there. And I
I
was
think
like,
that that makes
okay. And it
sense.
talked me into it.
Yeah, that happens to a lot of people who have been in those kind of situations. I mean, it's just, yeah, you kind of get addicted to the adrenaline almost
Yeah,
of it.
my
And
brain
yeah,
pathways were, yeah, they were built differently at that point for sure. And
yeah,
then Adam was like,
that's why therapy is important, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And then Adam was like, I'm a safe person, but let me reveal you to my family.
yeah,
And then it was like a
yep,
fire hose of, and I was like, what did I do?
yep, true. You're welcome. There's your highs and lows.
Yeah, you got your
And I was
excitement.
like, I want off this ride, please.
Well, this is a whole other like can of worms, to think about. But like that relationship that you're talking about before, that person was much older than you. Like
Yes, it was
appropriately
preyed
older
upon.
than
Yes.
you when you were 17 and 18 years old.
Mhm.
I think about in a lot of these situations, I think that it is, you know, whether it's actual age, experience, all that kind of stuff, these people know what they're doing when they're entering into these, abusive relationships and who they're choosing and how they're doing it. And I think that like the other person's like, "Oh, I want to be loved and I want to be, in this, relationship and that stuff like that. But the other person, it has this sort of ulterior motive, whether
Mhm.
completely consciously or subconsciously. And I think that it just, in this book especially, that's, will be coming out when this podcast is released, it's like understanding that when you're talking to people and these things are happening, are not unaware that they are abusing someone. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Like they know exactly what they're doing.
They know they're
And
manipulating.
yes, they know they're manipulating. And I think that
They're just really good at not showing their hand.
yeah, and I think that that's why it becomes something really like infuriating when it becomes the victim blaming, when it becomes why aren't you leaving? It's because you're talking to like they're in this situation with a professional abuser. They know
Right. They do.
exactly what to do to pull away and
Yep.
to bring
I was
them
just gonna
back.
say they do enough to be like, well, no, he gave me this permission, or he didn't say for that. It's enough that you can say that doesn't fit the pattern, but there's enough. Yeah, it is. It's like enough that it's like a, what's the word? Like, you don't think there's a pattern
Yeah.
because they break it enough, but there's, if you really, and then you have that friend on the outside that says that, and you think, do you just not want to be happy for me? Or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Why aren't you happy for me? Don't you
why
want me
can't
to
you
have
see? You
this?
just don't know him
I
like
don't
I
do
know
this to you
him.
with your
Yes.
relationship. Why are you doing this to me with mine?
Nobody's perfect.
And I think
Yeah.
And I think like Winnie and her dad, I think her dad is probably, 75% horrible, but there
Yeah.
is still
Maybe
those
more.
moments where she's like, okay, that's my dad. He did this for me today. He always provides, right? He has a good job. Like we're always have food, all of those different kinds of things. And someone like Winnie grows up to be Birdie, right?
Yeah.
So, like, as this almost like not together duology, they kind of just show this whole large tapestry of how abuse and how these different things kind of create a lot of the fucked up shit that we deal with right now.
Yeah, and I'm circling back to what I said at the beginning. Like, Emma, my background was just that I didn't think I read horror at all, but I loved reading things like this, and I didn't realize that this was horror and it was horrific. And I just feel like big goal for me for this podcast is to expose authors like yourself to a wider audience of people that ordinarily would not have selected their books thinking it's a horror book. And really, this is a horrific book for, books for women. Like, there are no women that shouldn't read these.
And I think that these are books that, if you're taking a psychology course or you're taking a
Absolutely.
course about, there's so many different things that you can take about deviant minds or serial killers, abnormal psychology, all this kind of stuff. And these books deserve to be read right along, nonfiction, because I think they get to the heart of how these things happen just as well as any of those.
Thank you. That's like the biggest compliment because I did try so hard to make them feel real and well researched and everything. So that means so much to me.
Like if someone gave me this and they're like, basically it's not like a fictionalized, because a lot of, Anne Rule and stuff does that too, where it's like, it is the conversations that people are having, and, and Crushing Snails mixed in police interviews and all this stuff. If someone handed me that and said, this is a true story, I would not question it in a second,
I'm so
'cause
glad it's not though. Although there's plenty of crimes that are close enough.
it is so crushing and honest and real that I definitely think that it breaks out of, anything that you might think, you read it and you're like, oh, this is a book, the back of it says explaining how a serial killer is formed and stuff like that. And it's like, it is that, but it is so much more when it comes to psychology, and anyone that is interested in how a mind works and how pressures, of abuse and things like that. And, like you said, developmental psychology, like this is for anyone, and it is heavy and it is dark, but it earns your attention, and it earns a place to be read for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I could just like, we're sitting here and I'm having so many thoughts. Like, I'm thinking about the part at the beginning of the book where he's like,
shoot me in the face.
Yeah, and
Okay.
he's just like masturbating outside of the window. And then I'm thinking, I think the book is that I have is, I want to say it's 3 women, and the mom is like sharing how like she just every day she'd go to work and there'd be a man walking down the street just masturbating right behind her, jerking off to her.
Mm.
And
That
like
happens
it was just
all
normal.
the
Like she just
time
had
to
to
women.
put up with it. Right. And so then my mind went to that news pundit, that Jeffrey Toobin that got caught like masturbating on screen, and how like you're like, it's been enough time. Like we can
bring him back.
It's like, oh, Jeffrey, you were caught. And it's like, what in the actual fuck? Like, there's really no repercussions.
No.
Society likes to forgive men for things like if it wasn't, especially if it wasn't full on rape. They're like, oh, well, what
Then you
harm
become
did
president.
it cause? And it's like, what?
Did you hear that? They like to reward him if it's not full on rape, and Adam goes, yeah, well, then you become president.
God, I know. Don't even get me started on that.
But no, it just, so there's a few authors I think that I've read their books or their works, and I'm immediately like, I will do everything I can in my power to get as many people to read them. And
you're one of them.
List immediately.
Absolutely.
So, whatever comes, I will be right there championing. So let's segue into where people can find you, where they can buy your books, and what is in your future?
So all of like the information about me and all my books is on my website, emmaemurray.com. And I mean, you can find me on Instagram, emmaemurray _ because there's already an Emma E. Murray, apparently.
What? The gall, the
Yeah.
unmitigated gall. Like,
How dare they?
But so what's coming up? I mean, so actually, funny enough, I have a book that is on an exclusive submission right now that I'm really hoping gets picked up because it's kind of like the third. It's I know they're not actually related, but it feels like the third in like this trilogy of like criminality of my
Yes.
novels. So I'm really hoping that one gets picked up. So I have another 2 books that are on sub also, but they're pretty
Man,
different. But I everything I write does come down to this character study of like psychology. And so I don't
I'm
think
just
I'll ever
excited.
write
There's a
something that's not
potential 3
that.
more books that I get to read soon.
Hopefully they get picked up.
I mean,
They will.
yes, you have to let's just claim it. Let's
Mhm.
just, what's the word?
Manifest.
Yes, that's what I'm
Mhm.
looking for.
I will say I do have content warnings because they are not in my books, but I have them all on my website because while some people who have gone through this kind of situation might feel very seen and appreciate it, I could also see this being extremely triggering for some people. So I
Yeah,
just
you
want to
gotta
put that out
see what
there.
part of your journey are you at?
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
talk about horror is the genre that doesn't flinch, right? It doesn't look away, and sometimes that will mean there are things in the books that are really hard to read, but that doesn't make them any less important or valid at the same time. But yes, as a person, you need to know if you do have things that are going to cause, mental distress, we certainly don't want you to have that
Yeah. And my
outside of
books definitely do
consensual
that.
mental distress.
Well, I feel like for the most part, like when you go through a breakup or you have really hard things, like music can be incredibly cathartic. And I just remember latching on to certain
Mhm.
lyrics that I was like, oh my God, like it shone a light bulb, like the miseducation of Lauryn Hill,
Mhm.
like certain parts. And I was like, oh my God, like it was just this time for me. But now we've got a book like this,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
you have a playlist for both books too,
Yes, and
right?
I
I
love that
do.
you do that.
Yep.
I really, well, that's basically where I was going
Mhm.
with this is to
Yeah.
say you've combined both. You take the time to curate that. And I think it's so huge. I'm just like, if you've ever found what's that song that says sad songs say so much,
Mhm.
when you're going through it, it's like now you've got a book and a playlist with it. So
Multiple books and short stories, and
yeah,
because didn't even get to Win the Devil, but my God, there's so much in that, 50-page novelette. I'm like, how did you pack so much into this too? Because it goes into things, but it does ultimately, it is more of a revenge fantasy kind of thing too. But I just want to make sure, Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day, August 26th.
Yes, that is when it
From
comes out.
Apocalypse Party again. Crushing Snails is out now. You should buy that immediately and pre-order multiple copies to give to your friends
yeah.
of Shoot Me in the Face as well.
Yeah, just have an
Um,
arsenal ready for our friends because they're going to end up dating a douchebag.
yeah,
They're going to need it.
like,
And then you just
do
give
you
them this
want to be
book.
in this? Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you watch QVC and they're like, pick up this pack of mascara because you can give one to this person, a friend.
Mhm.
It's great for stocking stuffers. It's like, they're going to end up with a douchebag somewhere. Someone's going to need this.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna end up in a grocery store.
Yeah.
Some asshole is gonna be pretending to look at the crackers,
You're
and
going to
you're
meet
gonna
someone who doesn't actually eat a bologna sandwich.
exactly, and you need that push to say, I can punch him directly in the nuts.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we'll leave you with that. M says punch them in the nuts, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Punch predators in the
Let's
nuts.
get Kaylee to make some merch for her.
Yeah, exactly. So we need no, but seriously, like, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and it
Yes.
was everything I thought it would be, and
And more.
I need more. So we will be definitely talking again when all of these wonderful books get picked up, which they will shortly, and we'll, push those as well. So
Oh,
thank you
thank you
so
so
much for your
much.
Thanks,
time.
Emma. This has been an episode of Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said, brought to you by Loud in the Library Studios, podcast manager Dewey Allen, meow, and Francis, our logo, who always insists that we stay insightfully unhinged while also being surprisingly therapeutic.